Eileen dove down from the roofs, straight onto the wandering cleric beast, landing in the cruel horns atop its head, as if landing within a tree, and stabbing straight down. As it tossed around with its head and threw its hands up to swat her away, she jumped down, and Ludwig ran out from behind the corner and cut once at the leg so it bent over, where he was able to simply step forward and with an upward swing of the greatsword strike along the side of its face. The cut had it reel to the side where Eileen had landed and cut into the arm it was supporting itself with while backing away from it. It fell down onto its side, and Ludwig came up and decisively thrusted the sword through the bottom of its jaw, all the way through its skull. She flicked the blood from the daggers, merged them, and retrieved her pistol from her chest strap. Efficient.
Is there no end to them? And no hunter in sight?
He walked around, eyes aimed towards the night sky searchingly. She walked over to one of the houses and knocked on the door. There was no answer. Ludwig walked over to another door opposite the street and did the same. Further down lay an entry door with burning incense urns placed on the doorsteps that she walked up to and knocked before speaking. The street is safe. Hunters? A meek voice responded right behind the door. A nervous man that likely had been alerted long ago by the recent ruckus. Yes, the way to the plaza is safe.
Eileen,
Ludwig said, and when she looked, he shook his head. But I'd advise you remain inside. Have enough incense? Yes. What is happening? Beasts are particularly large. People gather at the cathedral, but we cannot escort you, and the beasts roam yet. Stay inside, and don't open the door for anyone. Not even hunters, you hear? No, not for the clerics? No one. Just endure the night. Very well. Oh dear. He started mumbling as he stepped away from the door. She walked further down the street to where Ludwig had walked. We should head back. Fortify the plaza. He sighed. He took a nervous step forward, while the turning of his head grew more wild. She stepped after him and grabbed his arm. He looked at her hand holding him, then up at her and relaxed. We can't encourage people to walk that distance anymore. The risk of beasts having strayed is too great. He shook his head, not at her, just as a manifestation of his disheartedness.
And no hunter in sight.
There's still time, she said, without believing they would find anyone. She thought he must know, but she regardless did not want to say that all the hunters they had encountered were no longer hunters.
Right. You're right. Let's walk ahead and wrap around back to the plaza.
Upon walking a few paces down the street, there came a scream of a beast, followed by the sudden sighting of it as it flew past up ahead. They lunged into a sprint towards the end of the street, where it separated in both directions around a stone foundation, atop which the beast had appeared on. A fenced stair gave them access above to a round area at the end of a slightly curving and upward sloping street, leading towards the direction of the distant, grand cathedral, visible tall above the houses. A black, furry creature walking with the support of its bestial hand, the other holding a greatsword of the holy blades, as well as wrapped in the mantle of the white church garb, came prowling down the street towards them. It had its sight on the massive cleric beast, now engaged with another large, white-garbed man, wielding a greatsword like it was a normal straight sword in one hand, swinging at the beast. Naturally, Ludwig must have focused on the white garb and use of a weapon, ignoring the fact that the character was completely hunched, with a mane of black hair emerging from its back, and growling as loudly as the cleric beasts. While he flanked the beast engaged with the deformed church hunter, Eileen ran up towards the incoming man-beast and fired her pistol to get its attention. It flinched and let out a surprisingly human grunt of aggravation before looking her way. Before it could reach her, they were both distracted by a loud crashing coming from above them. On the left side of the winding street was a rise with a fenced edge, with further rooftops being visible up and beyond. Now came a cleric beast falling backwards, as if pushed over the edge and down in front of them, followed by a howling figure wielding a broken pillar as a weapon, leaping out to deliver a blow straight down at the beast as it landed. It was another partially robed and fur-covered beast, with horns emerging wildly from its head, and having forsaken its hunter armament for more devastating alternatives. The beast Eileen had shot at became distracted and instead charged the cleric beast as it threw off the pillar-wielding brute from it. The amount of combatants made her nervous, and she looked back to ascertain Ludwig's status. He was still ferociously battling the cleric beast, more engaged than any of the others around him. He darted in between them, and as she rushed over, she saw him dodge the charging horns coming at him, only to spin around towards the garbed beast, strike with the sword against its sword, then spun around again, and having turquoise light charge along his blade, which was released once he swung again, with such speed and strength, the beast could not react and was thrown by the bright blow. Eileen targeted the cleric beast, but did not manage to cut at it as it moved closer to Ludwig, who had lunged after the fiend he had pushed with a downward cleave, by all accounts finishing it. Just as the cleric beast was about to swing its fist at him, she cut at the leg, then darted forward to fire up at its head. It turned her way with a sweep of its arm and roared so mightily she became stunned by the loud volume, staggering back. She was able to retreat further back when it swiped again, but she still felt wary. More bright moonlight flashed behind it, and it jerked to the side, glaring down at Ludwig, who came sprinting past, looking straight at her, then back at the fiend while swinging at it, expending the light in the sword to send a wave of moonlight at its head. As it staggered, he glanced back at her again. The frenzy that had compelled him to fight was gone when he looked at her, and when she nodded to him, separating her blades, he smirked a bit. When the giant arm came down upon him, he stepped to the side while swinging upwards into it, while she ran up to the legs and cross-cut with the blades 2 times at them. It stepped out of their way and started slamming with both fists where Ludwig was, but he just managed to step back. The white-garbed beast leapt right into its side with the sword cutting straight into its ribs. It stumbled to the side while the attacker clung onto it, holding on to the sword buried within while roaring. Ludwig had to rapidly turn as the pillar-wielding beast came up behind. It swung horizontally with it in both hands. Eileen was quick to fly to him and thrust both her blades into its exposed side. As Ludwig was about to strike it, the large cleric beast came tumbling towards them, now wrestling with the other garbed fiend. It landed in between them, where it roared and grabbed the lesser beast with its giant arm and slammed it into the ground. But in the next moment, the second beast had jumped on its back, causing it to flail around, so both Eileen and Ludwig had to step back. It threw itself on its back in an attempt to get rid of its attacker, leaving the one that had been smashed into the ground fixated on Eileen as its next target, mainly because it spotted her first as it came to its feet. It lunged with a broad swing that she ducked towards and under, turned and slashed at nothing. It swung back at her again, which she avoided by stepping back, and in the next strike, Ludwig appeared to deflect the blow, which allowed her to leap in and pierce the blades into its exposed chest. It dropped the blade and made an angry grunt paired with a growl before trying to grab her. She stepped back, and past her came Ludwig, spinning around and severed its head from the body. Immediately they both turned to see the remaining beast dodge a swipe from the clawed hand and bash with the pillar against its face, causing it to fall over, where it proceeded to bash in the skull until the head was completely gone, leaving only the massive horns. It then planted the pillar in the ground as it heaved with exhaustion, as did the 2 of them. From beneath the growth of curving horns, the former church hunter looked up at them, so the yellow flashed in its eyes. It let out a final growling sigh before standing up, picking up the pillar, placed one malformed bestial foot on the pulp remaining of the head as it advanced towards them. Ludwig held his blade in front of the right side of his face, while Eileen started walking out to the side and flanking the beast. It stepped forward and struck down with the pillar at Ludwig. He stepped aside and moved in to attack, but it managed to redirect the swing of his greatsword by slamming it away with the pillar. Eileen flew upon its back and thrusted one blade straight into it, the other into its side. It spun around so quickly she was unable to react and was shoved back, only retaining hold of one of the blades. It turned back to grab the pillar and rolled away while taking hold of it. Then, as it came to its feet, jumped at her. She sprinted towards the leap and ducked right under it, and continued on where she could pick up the second blade. When she turned, Ludwig had intercepted it, ducking a high swing of the pillar, and struck right at its waist while doing so, then again as he stood. The fiend stumbled back, but struck Ludwig in the face with its free left hand. Eileen had already come up to them and sliced at the arm having struck him, then spun around to its side where she slashed again, aiming for the neck, but could only reach the shoulder. It only flailed its arm to keep her at bay, then brandished the pillar over its head to strike at the still dazed Ludwig. When she saw it, she jumped right onto its back, plunging her blades into it like ice picks, one into the right shoulder, the other into the base of its neck. It froze and screamed. At first it was inhuman, echoing and ferocious like the cleric beasts, but it transitioned into the angry basal shout of a man as it dropped the pillar and fell on its knees. She retrieved the blades and saw Ludwig meeting the fiend's eyes like he would a man. There was sympathy, understanding in them. Then he thrust the sword through its heart, so it emerged at the back. The beast sighed quietly and crumpled to the ground when he swiftly withdrew the blade. He looked at the corpse, then up at her.
I told you. Brave beast slayers till the very last. Even in...
His words wavered as he looked back at the beast, seemingly at a loss for what he wanted to say. Gascoigne flew up as soon as the blue light appeared before his eyes. By now the days of awakening did not affect him. That is to say, it was not gone, and it still was an unnerving experience, as it was essentially sprung from the trauma of death. But in some twisted sense that he could not consciously comprehend, that feeling now simply meant he was alive. And on this night, him being alive only meant one thing: spare others from death. He rushed out from Erdtree Chapel, through the cemetery strewn with the carcasses of his previous preys, and up the steps, filled with even more abhorrent bodies, back to the round plaza, where he immediately jumped with a swing over his head into the back of the cleric beast standing at the gates. It turned around with a wide sweep. Sometimes it felt like he could tell the future, since he had already stepped back, not really knowing what the beast would do. But he had fought enough of them at this point, and even perished to such a retaliation, and it was as if his body moved on its own, compelling him to action to avoid the harrowing end. On the other side he saw Gratia dart forward and delivered a jumping strike straight into its kneecap, causing it to buckle under it. He swung straight up into the head as the upper body came down, lodging the axe into its jaw. Once he noticed just how firmly it had stuck, he tugged with both hands at the lower end of the hilt and pulled it out to extend it. In the same pull, the axe dislodged, and he took a step back, spun around and violently struck hard into the same spot of the head as the axe came around, throwing it into the building to the side, where it proceeded to fall down dead on the steps. It in fact started to become quite crowded, with massive bodies all around them, especially along the steps leading up to the plaza.
How's Henrik?
He grunted as he followed Gratia back to the open area.
Fine.
She pointed ahead, where he could see 4 or so people heading into the cathedral, with a yellow garb in the front leading them.
What about the others? Haven't seen them yet. Oh. Well then.
He pushed the handle together.
Cover me. Calm down, you. Just hold here for a moment. Wait for Henrik.
He grunted. He started looking around, taking off his hat just to feel the air in his hair. He brushed it back, then put the hat back on. He heard a roar in the distance and started jogging towards it.
Here we go,
Gratia said, before her feet could be heard following. He crossed the plaza and headed down a street below a bridge between 2 houses, where he turned down to the right, down even more narrow steps, until he came out in a large roundabout, where a quadrupedal beast, the size of a carriage, was tearing away the bars from a window. Gascoigne started screaming while he charged at it, jumping and cutting into the face that turned his way. It let out a low and monstrous whine before scurrying back on its clawed hands, then prowled to the side. He fired his pistol while darting to the side, away from the house, then rapidly advanced with an uppercut strike he dragged along the ground. From that angle he saw people moving around in the window, but he quickly returned his focus to his prey. Gratia charged in and shoved it by bracing against it with her crossed forearms, then delivered a right uppercut into its starved belly. They both had to dodge the beast's flailing claws as it started swiping wildly at them while backing away. Then it started charging at them like a bull, running straight across the space. They ran after, him ducking a swipe and slashing another uppercut into its shin as he stood, while Gratia further pummeled the side of its hunched abdomen. It was almost thrown by his cut, and Gratia ran around behind him, while he stepped backwards. Just as it was about to regain itself, she punched it straight in the jaw, followed by him swinging the axe down into its head, crushing it into the ground. He cut down additional times just to make sure, while Gratia ran over to the house to bang excessively on the door.
It's safe now. Come on. We'll take you to the Grand Cathedral for shelter.
She called, and once he came up, an entire family emerged. Mother and father, a grandparent, 3 children, and a woman presumably being a parent's sibling.
But is it safe now?
With us, it is. Gascoigne motioned with a broad wave in the direction they had come from. The church will give you ample shelter. Come now, no dallying. He ran ahead of them, the parents picking up 2 of the smaller children, while the other was big enough to run quickly ahead of them. At every corner, Gascoigne had to hold out a hand to stop him specifically, as he was very eager to remain close as his tail. When they came onto the round plaza again, he saw Henrik charging ahead towards a fiend just stepping through the gate at the opposite side to the cathedral ascent.
Stay here!
He shouted and ran out for his aid. He caught up to him, and the 2 assaulted the crawling fiend, having a particular long muzzle, almost like a beak, and crawling on all 4s. It opened its maw to let out a hissing growl that devolved into a full roar as it ran towards them with the maw fully open. They leapt to the side and only then became aware of a stomping sound having previously been very dampened, but now saw a massive church giant lumbering up to meet the beast, sprinting its way and brought down its hefty axe right into the beast's head, bringing it to an abrupt stop. 3 more giants came sauntering up behind it, with white-garbed clerics walking in between them, bearing tricones with covers in front of their eyes, wielding mostly light weaponry. Gratia had emerged onto the plaza, shepherding the people towards the clerics, with the widest berth to the giants as they proceeded to wander out onto the plaza. Flanking each giant were 2 of the clerics, one ringing with a bell that seemed to attract the giant's attention, as it would turn its head once it rang, changing its course. Henrik walked up and patted him once on the shoulder.
There you go, son. Reinforcement is here.
He heaved, then took a composing breath and straightened his back.
Finally.
Out from the gathering came Simon and Henriette, walking towards them, having long since spotted them.
Gods,
Simon sighed.
How are things holding together here?
As good as can be.
Gascoigne said, and felt how the words alone tired him out. One of the giants let out a loud grunting roar and started charging around a corner. In the next moment it was pushed back by a slightly less giant beast having jumped on it, biting at its throat. It managed to push the giant man-wolf off it and started striking wildly into the ground. As the battle progressed, Gascoigne was about to engage, but was stopped by Henrik grabbing his arm and Henriette speaking.
Let them take care of it. The plaza is safe. Let's take care of stragglers remaining spread out in the ward. There are still people to think about.
He nodded, and Henrik released his arm, then spoke silently.
You gather yourself. Visit it all. The night might soon be over.
He did not waste any time in the dream. He quickly stood and walked over to the doll, who did not manage to address him due to how he was already holding out his hand while approaching. She took it and knelt down while he closed his eyes. He started breathing and felt his body become lighter, and for a very brief instant, like it completely vanished. He opened his eyes and was about to leave, but stopped when he heard a doll clear her throat. He was facing the headstones, but turned to look at her once nothing happened. She stared back with a slightly open mouth, then closed it, but opened it again, evidently finding it hard to say what she wanted.
What? The hunt is still on.
I know, good hunter, but just remember that morning always comes.
Not for some, it won't.
I know, but you should still be one of them. And, good hunter, I don't want you to remain in the night once the dawn breaks.
Huh?
He turned fully to her.
Just that the hunt is hard, and you are oh so strong, but it will end. Do not struggle for the sake of the night. Struggle for the sake of the morning. Please, good hunter, lest you become stuck in it.
He nodded, searched the ground for a moment, then looked back at her.
I'll try and keep that in mind. Whatever gets me through putting down all these beasts.
Both she and Ludwig hesitated slightly at the sight of the massive church giants when they came onto the plaza. But not for long, and continued up to the large gathering in the gate, in between the cathedral ascent and the plaza itself. Several choir members were talking with their previous group of hunters.
Clerics!
Ludwig called as they came up, and everyone looked his way.
What is the source of this? Never have I seen such a sudden outburst. Something must be dreadfully wrong.
They looked at him silently, then briefly amongst each other, before one of them spoke.
This is all the hunters at your disposal, Captain.
Yes, it would seem.
Have you sent people to inform the hunters outside of the ward?
No. There was no one to spare.
Henriette left to scout the ward, Captain?
Simon added. The head with the blindfold cap looked back at his fellow clerics. Although half of his face was obscured, he seemed very on edge and uneasy.
We will have to send someone else then.
Have you... They all became distracted by the sound of a fleeing crowd, turning to see a mass of people running out from the church gate, down the steps, and scattering down the first side street they could in fearful panic. A harrowing roar, unlike most others, was heard over the deep night sky. It sounded very human, but inhumanly loud. The scream of a furious man came from the wide open cathedral gate. They all stepped out of the way for the people rushing all the way down, where the clerics started hollering and holding up their hands to calm them and inquire loudly what was going on. Their query was answered by a deafening, booming crash, and the very gates of the cathedral of the healing church flying off their hinges. They flew outward in a cloud of dust and debris that scattered in the air. Emerging from the disorientation was a frightfully large creature, completely black and with uncannily symmetrical horns that adorned its silhouette, remarkably similar to a ram's emerging from its head and arching backwards. It roared once more, or rather screamed at the sky before flying down the stairs on long and slender arms, stretching far over the steps after the fleeing people and towards the plaza.
Ready! Make ready!
Ludwig shouted as they moved out further onto the plaza. Eileen and the other hunters followed him, while the clerics scrambled to bring themselves and the devastatingly distraught civilians out of the fearful charge. They backed up all the way to the statue standing in the center. A giant had lazily turned and started advancing towards the threat. The freakish beast came barreling down with its horns lowered so they dragged against the steps. And when the giant lifted the axe to strike, it threw its head up, the horns being sent straight into the giant's chest and tossing the massive figure out of the way onto the nearby building, where it tumbled off, dead. It remained standing there, the long arms like that of a deer, but with horrible clawed fingers at the ends. The back legs were twisted into a sort of hoof formation of bone. It raised, much like a horse, and the claw-adorned hands reached up to the sky like a beckoning prayer, roaring triumphantly. As if called by the terrible roar, two additional beasts, albeit smaller, emerged from the ruined cathedral gate, turning their long muscles around in search for prey. The giant ram beast landed down and ran around the plaza before leaping in at them with its arms outstretched. The claws were unnaturally long like swords, and the face was a famined muscle that almost looked just like bone without skin. Behind it flowed a tangled black mane. Its eyes were obscured by the incredible growth of the massive curved horns. Its attempt to scoop them up failed as they all jumped aside. They were quick to retaliate, and their weapons impacted upon its flesh. It leaped up with the power of its hind legs and ran away. It brushed across the surrounding buildings and was abruptly shoved back out into the plaza by the second giant, having wandered back from down the street. The giant stepped out further, brought the axe over its head, and screamed in a booming basal voice while bringing it down, cutting into the beast's horn as it threw its head towards the giant. It leapt away and ran around the plaza, having the center statue in between it and the giant. Their party of hunters had spread themselves out all over the plaza. As the fiend was so quick and unpredictable, one never knew where the chance to attack would show itself. Without stopping, it turned towards Eileen, standing close to the center monument, and quickly lunged its momentum in her direction. It lowered its horns so they scraped along the ground as it charged forward with blinding sparks splashing from it. She tossed herself far to the side into a roll that took her outside its assault. As she stood, she saw Gratia come running straight towards it from the side, and with all her speed, crashed into the head with her metal fists. The impact threw the monster off course, ramming against the giant and sending them both crashing straight into a house by the edge of the plaza. It destroyed the whole facade, and the living room was visible when it pulled out the horns, dazed. Gratia was first on the scene to attack, while the giant clumsily came to his feet. But the beast regained a semblance of awareness sufficiently quickly, rose on its hind legs once more, and screamed. A tormented yell, sounding more to convey agony than fury. Then it rushed off, towards central Yhorm.
After it. Gascoigne, Henrik. Make sure the plaza is safe, then join us. The rest with me.
Ludwig raised his sword towards the direction and ran after it, with Gratia, Simon and Eileen following. They all sprinted through the exit gate, opposite to the cathedral ascent, and down a winding street of steps. There the beast had been halted and was currently tumbling into another of the church giants that had come the opposite direction. They fell loudly down the street, hitting against the houses as they did. When they finally separated and the beast tumbled away, the giant reached for the axe and rose up with the support of the weapon. But the beast furiously assaulted it, mangling the giant with its long claw fingers, while it tried to get a few hits in with the axe. But the sheer mountainous size had the giant overwhelmed, and it was eventually toppled. But before it did, the giant had managed to carve out a bleeding and gushing wound in the beast's shoulder, as she could see. It continuously sliced and tore over the giant's body when they all came up behind it, where Ludwig swung first at it with the blade. It turned up towards the sky and screamed a horrible and agonizing howl. Then it darted further down the street. The path took them to the edge of the Cathedral Ward Foundation, with an overlook of the town and the great bridges. The Colossus had stopped at a large round lookout point off the city. Down below lay the river that ran through Old Yhorm. It stood on its hind legs and howled at the sky, specifically the moon. It then turned towards them as they joined it on the platform. It wasted no time and lunged towards them, crashing into the opening of the street as they jumped aside. Aside from the round overlook, the area was more ideal for a confrontation, since it did not have as much space to move around in, gaining that lethal speed as seen before. Down to the right, the street continued to access one of the great bridges. Eileen was first to stab with her considerably small blades into the fiend's hind legs. They started to kick like a furious horse, and she moved away. The beast jumped to the right and onto a nearby building. It lay on it like a predator and brandished its teeth at them, then let out an intimidating roar. With a quick motion with his hand over his blade, the moonlight gathered along it. Then Ludwig swung to release the gathered light towards the maw. It jumped straight over them and landed further down the street. The ground trembled as it did. Both Eileen and Gratia ran towards it, taking different sides, while Simon remained behind to fire the first arrow. It let them pass, more focused on Ludwig it seemed. Eileen threw a Molotov once she had passed it. It flinched by the flames, but was soon more distracted by the iron fists striking against its leg. It turned its head around, and the two of them stepped back further to create a distance between them, as it started to stomp down with both arms and legs. Simon joined Ludwig, folding his bow and lunged towards it, where they both resumed the work of damaging its thick and sturdy hind legs. It swiped broadly with one arm at them, then followed with another when they dodged backwards. With the left arm closely missing Eileen, she proceeded to quickly leap forward and cut with both blades to slice open the skin on the forearm. Blood sprayed and it fell forward when the support of the arm crumpled beneath it, leaning on its left shoulder. She managed to cut into the side of its face before it regained itself and stood. It let out a roar towards the heavens. She had never experienced a sound like that. It increased in volume and intensity, so much so that it started to hurt her head until she and the others were completely stunned by it. It ceased by jumping over them once more. When she turned, it had landed and now started to rush towards them, frantically slamming and swiping its arms as it approached. She was quick to avoid. Ludwig was more daring and vanished into the flurry of its assault. A splatter of blood shot out as he managed to dodge and cut just at the right moment, emerging under its belly. Now Gratia and Ludwig remained in close proximity to it, while Eileen had stepped back to where she discovered how Simon had poured a massive pool of flammable oil into the street. They both quickly stepped around to stand with it between them and the beast. They saw how it swiped outward with its arm, causing Gratia to stumble away. When it put its arm down, she punched at it, causing it to buckle, but as the beast fell, it swiped frantically with its other arm, which swept her away over the edge, where she quickly vanished soundlessly. Both she and Simon only saw it as a detriment to their struggle, and not as the mournful loss it might have appeared as, were it not for the dream. As it stood back up and started turning to Ludwig, standing on its other side, Simon let loose an arrow that hit below its jaw. As it tossed its head around, Eileen threw another Molotov simply to distract it further. It was successful, and it started moving towards them, rising up on only its hind legs while walking, clenching its fists above its head, then bringing them down straight where they stood. As they leapt away, they simultaneously tossed in a Molotov each. The area before it, and slightly under it, caught on fire. Flames crept up along its hide and singed the fur. It grew crazed and jumped up and down, kicking and flailing its arms to rid itself of the spreading flames. In its madness, one arm flung out and caught Simon. He was tossed into a tree as blood traced his path at the edge of the road, landing limp on the ground. But she knew that he too would simply awaken anew. She stepped further back to avoid the swipes as the beast composed itself somewhat, fixing its gaping and smoldering jaw in her direction.
Eileen!
Ludwig screamed and came running up from behind it. It punched a close fist towards her, which she avoided. There came a grab from the other hand that she leapt away from, but was not prepared for the horns that plunged towards her. The impact came close to her, only to be turned upwards again with tremendous force. The blunt side of one caught her, and she was thrown clear. She did not, miraculously, suffer greatly from the tumble, and she turned herself over to see Ludwig charging ahead. The moonlight shone, and it was like time stopped when he cast a glance back at her. With the shades of turquoise lighting up his face, his eyes met hers. She knew how cursed he had been from the start, but did not want to believe it. She shook her head in a wordless plea, and he turned away. With his back turned, facing the beast, he held the sword in front of his face. Next, he plunged the sword into the ground. As the beast charged once again with its horns at him, it was caught in a wide beam of pure cosmic abyssal light, shooting up in front of Ludwig, capturing the entire head of the creature. It staggered back. Ludwig flew after it, almost riding along the moonlight. It danced around him with a will of its own. Where he brought his sword, it followed and left destruction. The beast leapt aside and ran along the edge of the street, where the foundation began the steep descent into the valley, back to the round vantage point. Ludwig sent 3 flashes of light after it. Then he thrusted his sword forward, and in a giant flash of light, shot across the street. The moonlight spear impacted with the beast, and Ludwig appeared, having travelled with the light. Eileen looked in horror how the arm holding the sword had grown longer. The beast attempted to swipe, but Ludwig aimed to cut the approaching fist. Blade and hand impacted, and it was cut apart, down between the fingers. The monster reeled back, clutching its halved hand while Ludwig had grown larger in his form. Had it not been so terrible to witness, Eileen would have let out a sorrowful cry. But she was stunned, lying on the stone. With each swing, the beast grew weaker. Blood painted the street, and Ludwig's own form became something else. But he did not notice. He was as elegant as ever, despite forsaking his humanity. Finally having grown to half the size of the monster's own, and his visage being horribly malformed, he swung his sword with a brilliant blade, having amassed enough turquoise moonlight to match his size, bringing the beast to the ground. Where it lay, he plunged the sword down, and an explosion of light erupted, encompassing all sight. Stone shattered and a huge rumble echoed in the night. As the light faded, Ludwig had damaged the whole platform, and it now cracked under the weight of the dead monstrosity. It fell down the cliff, out of her sight. A loud crash marked its impact down in the river. She stood, holding her blade firm. Still on the platform, holding the moonlight sword, stood Ludwig, facing out over the cliff. A towering amalgamation of a body. A large mane with a sickly protrusion on his right shoulder. His legs were a mess of smaller, horse-like legs. One or two too many. Still wrapped in what remained of his white hunter garb and the holy shawl. He turned back to her. His face was a hideous deformation of his former, like it had been split open and elongated on its right half. A grin stretched far with protruding teeth. His right eye seemed dysfunctional, but the left saw her. In an agonizing second, she thought to see traces of him in that eye. She took off her mask and tossed it aside, letting her raven hair flow in the nightly breeze. The sword fell from his grip, and he fell forward onto his slender, hairy arms. He started to grunt and wheeze, not looking at her like a man, but as a beast. He let out a shrill cry. He charged, sending his enormous mass towards her. She stepped aside and tore at his side as he passed. He roared anew and reached for her with his hideous clawed fingers. She cut at them and he recoiled. While supporting his frontal weight onto his left arm, he swiped continuously with his right, positioned sickly far back, as most of the shoulder was taken by a freakish maw protrusion. He slammed down as she leapt forward past him. She stabbed deep with both blades into his lower part, resembling a horse torso. He staggered and cried out. She flipped onto his back, throwing herself up and stabbed deep into his back. He jumped, trying to toss her off while reaching with his badly positioned arm. Each horrifying high-pitched scream pierced into her very being. She argued desperately with herself, but there was nothing left of the brave Ludwig. But still could not manage to make the deed less difficult to carry out. Mercy had to be shown, and only she remained to do so. She carved her way to his head and managed to pierce his right eye, before he rose up and tossed her in front of him. She landed with a roll. He leapt after her. Taking the risk, she slid her body towards him as he came flying. He landed with his head over her. She thrusted upwards, and he screamed, but not for long. The volume died down, as did his movement, and she pulled aside, releasing the blade. His body came crashing down and became still. When Eileen awakened, the workshop was burning. She thought it first could be some other dream. Horrified as she was, she could still barely walk after the ordeal. Before the workshop, down the steps, stood a doll.
Well, it's burning. Do not worry, good hunter. Dawn will soon break. What? But the tools. And what of German? He is waiting at the foot of the great tree. But is he not concerned? Will it be all right?
The doll's face did not flinch or betray any emotions.
Oh, good hunter, do not feel too attached. Your place is not here. What do you mean to say?
She pointed down the path towards an open gate, leading into an area she had not been before. She shot an annoyed glance at the doll and turned to leave.
Goodbye.
Eileen stopped briefly, but she was too distraught to say anything appropriate, for whatever it was worth. She walked down the path and through the gate. There was a large field with thousands of the pretty stargazer lilies. Here there was a sea of green and white. Lining the ground's perimeter were gravestones. Glancing quickly, she saw some names she was familiar with. She recognized the familiar inscription of the names Fiachra and Kadok. She also found the name Jura, heard on the mouths of many hunters long ago, when she was still new. And Henrik, Fiona, Issy, George, Vitus, Kenrick. Walking along the names of old hunters, she felt at peace, though she could not shake the memory of her deeds. It made her want to sleep and dream even more. Her eyes finally landed on the familiar wheelchair between the thick roots of the great tree. On a little rise in the starry flowered field sat German, patiently waiting, leaning on his cane. She walked calmly over the flowers up to him.
German.
He sat up straight in his chair. His mournful sigh interrupted her.
Good hunter. You have hunted. But now the dream must end. This nightmare will fade, and you will awake anew, free of this terrible duty.
But no, there are still...
He held up a hand and shook his head.
The hunters are no more, I am afraid. The town will have to manage. I hoped they would endure. But it seems to have grown too large. But there can still be hope with each rising sun. Now you will die, but fear not. It will only be your awakening.
No.
German looked at her, narrowing his eyes.
No?
No. I won't.
He released his cane, and it fell towards her. She backed up so as not to be hit by it. He let out a bothered sigh and nodded in a grim understanding.
Well, oh well. It happens. I've yet to understand you lot.
He started to lift himself from the chair, and she backed further, surprised.
What it is you see in the dream.
He took one step out of the chair, planting his pegged leg among the stargazer lilies.
It is everything.
She burst out.
In the other world, I have nothing left.
A slight breeze came upon them, and his black, tattered mantle danced gently along it, as did her feathers.
Ah, the young. Ever curious, yet so weak. You'll thank me one day. You'll see.
Quicker than she could perceive, he had drawn a curved blade that hung from his side and slammed it up in the hilt on his back. A handle folded out, and he calmly grabbed hold of it as it emerged behind his shoulder. As he held it, he started to limp towards her. She did not quite yet know what to make of it. He had suddenly swung with his left hand, sending the scythe flying towards her while grabbing it with both hands. It nearly hit her as she dodged back. Now, holding the scythe in both hands, he walked closer.
Don't! Please, Gammon!
He said nothing. She backed further from him. His one leg limited his movement as he slowly limped closer. Or so she thought. He suddenly darted forward as if flying, spinning the scythe around him, and landed on her left with a low sweep of the blade. She jumped away and only now reluctantly brandished her own blade. Within a second he had folded the handle and plucked off the curved blade, with a resonating clang into his hand. She ducked and ran up to him. He responded by flying into a devastating series of swings that both parried her own and continued to assault her. She had little choice but to flank him. He rolled away from her swipes, and as he stood, made an impressively far leap to her left side and lunged towards her, swinging the blade. She fired her pistol, and he staggered out of his rampage. She jumped aside and watched him stumble a bit before turning towards her. He jammed the blade back into the hilt, took a quick step towards her, and reached out with the scythe. It reached around her and dug shallowly into her back as it pulled her close. The pommel of the hilt shot up and hit her in the face. It mostly impacted with the sturdy mask that protected her, but sent pieces of it flying. She rolled backwards and immediately jumped back at him. He swiped away her blade, throwing her off course, but not enough so. Her blade dug into his side. He kicked her away and stepped backwards. She tore blade from blade. Gehrman faced the giant full moon and stretched out his arms. Light started to form around him, not wholly unlike Ludwig's moonlight, but of a lighter, less dense variant. More pure even. A high pitch increased over time as the light grew more blinding. In the last second, Eileen tossed herself blindly away as the light exploded around her. She saw and felt the grass and the stargazer lilies blow in the force that rippled through the field. She stood only to catch Gehrman disappear in a foggy trail. He emerged, scythe raised high, just next to her. She ducked it, but he was quick to swing it again over his shoulder. The way he spun it and went with the flow of the blade, it seemed he could continue on forever. She aimed her pistol but missed as he vanished into smoke, emerging a few feet away from her. He leapt straight up in the air and prepared a swing, bringing the scythe behind him above the stargazer field. He swung the blade and a wave of force was sent her way. It impacted forcefully, sending several white petals whirling in the air. She nary escaped its strike and was hurled back. Still in the air, like stepping on a cloud, Gehrman flew over her and sent another force wave on his way. She rolled away and another eruption of white streaks blew up from where she had just been. He landed and tore the blade from the hilt. He stepped from side to side towards her, swiping the blades to her feet as he passed her. She stepped back and leapt after to thrust her blades at him. He cut them away with a powerful upward swing. She retaliated, but he managed to strike away all her blows, hard enough to almost bring her blades to the ground. In the same attack striking away her blades, he continued to fluently slamming it into the hilt on his back, grabbed the handle and swung the whole thing over his shoulder at her. It hit, and she was tossed several feet. She landed among the green and the flowers, blood warming and gushing her shoulder. She plunged a blood vial into her person, looked up to see Gehrman limping towards her.
Farewell, Eileen the Crow. Be free from the night.
Before she could react, the scythe swung down at her, and the curved tip pierced her chest. With eyes shut, she heard the bell of the grand cathedral toll. She opened them, and sunlight forced them shut again. Sheltering her view with her hand, she slowly opened and peered around. She sat at the steps of the grand cathedral. The gate was still a mess, the two doors partially laying further down the stairs among the rubble. She stood up, not feeling any of the previous wounds, only like she had awoken from a particularly deep sleep. She descended the steps onto the round plaza. It was empty, save for some areas of dried crimson. From an adjacent street, she saw a father carefully peer out, with his little daughter clutched close. The night was over.
Eye of a blood-drunk hunter. The eye of a blood-drunk hunter. Its pupils collapsed and turned to mush, indicating the onset of the scourge of beasts. A hunter who gets drunk with blood is said to be taken by the nightmare, destined to wander forever, engaged in an endless hunt. It is a fate that no hunter can escape.